All right, Mickey, I've got it taken care of down here. Why don't you take in Ed Wood's The Sinister Urge with a short about personal hygiene. Watch and learn, stink bombs.
This time we watched Season 6, Episode 13, The Sinister Urge.
In which our town is overrun by smutty pictures.
Well, good thing it's also got the short, Keeping Clean and Neat.
Thank goodness. But first, some follow-up?
Some follow-up, well, we've even got some news because we're recording this on the day that they finally announced what the Turkey Day plans this year are.
So when we gather together to watch cheesy movies, we know what's going to happen?
Exactly. Now, probably most of our listeners heard this a couple days ago, but it takes a little time for me to get around to editing it. So, but yeah, they're going to be doing a Turkey Day that's going to consist of a dozen episodes. It's going to start at 5 a.m. on Turkey Day itself and run until 3 a.m. the next day or midnight on Pacific Coast time.
Ooh, and they're going to be streaming it through...
all the usual places, on Twitch, on Shout TV, on YouTube, wherever you watch them streaming 24/7 MST3K content that makes Turkey Day a little bit redundant. You can watch it there. Although there's going to be some bumpers this time. They're going to have things. It'll be hosted by Jonah, and they're going to have some special guests in, both people associated with the show, like Joel and Felicia and Emily and Mary Jo, as well as some celebrities like Mark Hamill and people I don't know as well, like David Dastmalkian. I don't even know if that's how you say his name. I've been told that he's neat.
Oh, is he clean and neat?
We'll see. We'll find out.
So. That's so good, because last year for the bumpers that they had for the thing they were trying to do to promote season 14 and to get people to fund the Kickstarter, it was really hard that they weren't able to get the celebrities. It seems amazing to me, actually, that a year ago we still had the actor strike going on. Wow. Actually, now that I'm processing that just seems astonishing.
Yeah, last year's Turkey Day happened just after the actor strike ended, and none of the cast of MST3K were part of it, alas. And they were also using that to try to drum up support for season 14, and it was not a very good Turkey Day experience, frankly. But I am excited about this one, and they've also picked a bunch of good movies, and also for some reason the Castle of Fu Manchu.
Oh, well, sometimes you just got to throw a good stinker in there just to have a point of reference.
But in addition to the celebration of Turkey Day, we are here to celebrate the 100th birthday of Edward D. Wood Jr.
Oh, happy birthday, Edward. What, birthday in a month?
Well, it's still his centennial year.
That is
right?
so
We
true.
can celebrate for the next 11 months. We can celebrate everything beautiful in Ed Wood.
Oh my goodness. I've enjoyed learning more about Elwood. Elwood. I've been watching Legally Blonde in order to celebrate Ed Wood. Why not?
Isn't Elwood one of the Blues Brothers?
Oh, there is Elwood Blues, but I was thinking of Elle Wood from Legally Blonde. Anyway, it's not important because neither of them are Ed Wood, and frankly, I don't know if I could celebrate Ed Wood by watching Ed Wood movies for a full year. I think I might tap out at some point in time. So.
I don't think anybody expects you to spend somebody's centenary year doing nothing but enjoying that person's work.
Nothing but Ed Wood. Really commit.
But I am excited to talk about him with you today, and so let's get into the Sinister Urge.
Ooh. This time we watched Season 6, Episode 13, The Sinister Urge.
But first, a short, Keeping Clean and Neat. Some 8th graders have walked into a class of, 5th graders, 6th graders, something like that, and they're inspecting these younger students to determine who among them is the most clean and neat, which is a totally normal thing for them to do. And the reward for the clean and neat student couldn't be more exciting. They'll be shown off in a school assembly. Also, a totally normal thing to happen. Our narrator, though, is pretty sure that two of these students, Dawn and Mildred, would have had a better chance of winning the prize if they had more intense hygiene procedures. And so we follow young Dawn into his shower and Mildred to her hair combing station as the narrator lists 1,001 things they could do to be, let's admit it, marginally more clean. I mean, these kids were not exactly Pigpen at the start of the film, but the basic and unobjectionable levels of hygiene that they had achieved on their own were just never going to be enough for Dawn or Mildred to be chosen by the 8th graders, so there is something lacking in them that must be corrected. The end.
And now for our feature presentation. We open on a girl in just a bra and a slip running along a backcountry road, terrified. She runs into a park, finds a phone booth, and calls for help. The police are sent in, but only after she's dead. It's just another girl killed because of dirty pictures. It's the most dangerous crime syndicate of all, the Smut Picture Racket. Why, it's claimed the lives of so many girls, knifed down and mutilated in that very park by some psycho. The police know exactly who is to blame here. It's Gloria Henderson and her syndicate of pornographers. But the police just don't have the proof they need to round them up and put them behind bars where they belong. They do receive a tip from someone on the inside, though, and raid the studio where the smut pictures are being taken and stored. The raid is a devastating blow to Gloria's business as they arrest her photographer and confiscate her smutty film. She tries to strong-arm her distributors into collecting debts and selling more of the same old smut. But this action causes a riot at the ice cream shop, which gives the police another place to raid. More arrests are made, more smut pictures collected, and another blow to Gloria's syndicate lands. There's no choice now. She needs new ladies and new pictures to rebuild her empire. Thankfully, there are always starry-eyed innocents flocking to Hollywood that can be wrapped into the smut business. Gloria's helpful, friend, lover, business associate, guy? He recruits a young ingenue by giving her checks and a promise to make her a star. After quite a few of these, the ingenue is on the hook and must pose for the dirty pictures to repay her debt. But in an unfortunate twist of fate, the smut-loving psycho Dirk, who's been killing girls at Gloria's request, finds these new photos and decides he wants to plunge his knife into this new lovely. Psychos are bad for business, even when they're your psycho. Gloria and Johnny devise a plan to get rid of Dirk, the knife-wielding killer, but it backfires. Dirk comes back with a plan to take over, but his timing couldn't be worse. Gloria and Johnny have had a falling out. So while Dirk kills Johnny on Gloria's back porch, Gloria's changing clothes and preparing to kill Johnny too. She mistakes Dirk on that dark patio for Johnny and shoots him. She calls the police to blame her murder of Johnny on Dirk, the psycho killer, only to be caught in the lie when they find it's Dirk's body she shot. It's obvious she shot Dirk and he knifed Johnny, and that this series of homicides have killed Gloria's smut picture business. And that's how the police of Los Angeles stopped the smut picture racket for good. Just kidding. Porn is alive and well. The end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, oh, now, isn't this lovely? Tom and Crow have decided to throw GPC a shower. A lovely celebration for the lovely woman in your life. And what's a more lovely gift than pinking shears? So everyone gets her a pair of pinking shears. And now she has plenty of extra pinking shears in case her primary pinking shears gets jammed or dull, or I don't know, whatever happens to pinking shears that makes them less able to, pink. Something decidedly less lovely is happening down in Deep 13. Frank is missing. Turns out he's been watching a lot of movies like Speed that have influenced him to attempt an act of terrorism. He's going to bomb Deep 13. But first he's going to give GPC some pinking shears. Frank also sends a smoke bomb up the umbilicus to the satellite of love as a preview of his big evil plan to explode Deep 13. He's got Dr. F tied up to a lot of sticks of dynamite, though not in a way that impedes his movement at all, but Dr. F still asks Mike and the bots for help. And so Mike and the bots pretend to be police detectives trying to figure out what's caused Frank to go all evil and terrorist. Crow gets in touch with his contact, Huggy Bear. Not the Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch, but, a Huggy Bear. Well, somehow this random guy doesn't break the case wide open. And in fact, GPC says that this case is no piece of cake, which makes Mike think of potato cakes, Frank's one weakness. So he gets Dr. F to get his hands on a bag of potato cakes, and, with Mike's guidance, Dr. F is able to distract Frank from the detonator. And sure enough, Frank munches on the potato cake while Dr. F disconnects the detonator and saves the day. Just in time for a little letter. A young girl writes in about her science project, and Mike and the bots razz her because, I don't know, it's fun to pretend science is boring. At least GPC says that she did a nice job, and you know what? We hear it, it's just a show, also think you did great. Good job, Victoria. Oh, and Dr. F gets his revenge on Frank by deep frying him. What do you think, sirs? I've never had those potato cakes. Have you?
Well, I mean, I've had potato cakes.
Not potato pancakes. Potato cakes from Arby's.
Oh gosh. I mean, no, I've had the pressed potato cake hash brown things that McDonald's does.
Yeah, I think it's the same idea.
I'm sure it can't be very different, but Arby's has never been my favorite, so I doubt that I have had their potato cakes. And I would never have thought that they would be so good that Frank would stop bombing Deep 13. But to each their own. We all have our just unimaginable favorites. So there it is.
I mean, potatoes are real good. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing out. As a vegetarian, Arby's is not really a destination for me.
Oh, no. I doubt that their potato pancakes even qualify for vegetarian because they probably fry them in the same oil that they fry everything else,
I guess I'll have to look that up someday, but I don't know. They look lovely, and they're back. Apparently they went away in 2021 and just came back in July of this year. So link in the show notes, but
sure. Okay.
Potato cakes are back. So the Sinister Urge.
Yes, the Sinister Urge.
Did you have a fun time with the Sinister Urge?
Yeah, I think I did. The movie was silly enough, right? And I thought their riffing was pretty darn good. It was very entertaining. So I have to say, I'm really happy that I watched the movie Ed Wood and that I knew a little bit about Ed Wood before watching this, because otherwise all of the cross-dressing references that they made would have entirely gone over my head, right? Like, so many of their riffs are based on you knowing who Ed Wood is. And I assume that for the casual MST3K watcher, this is an inevitability, right? We all know who Ed Wood is, but until recently, I was not among that group. So
yeah, well, they had just done The Violent Years 3 episodes ago and Bride of the Monster a few years ago. So
it's true. Doing things out of order does make it a little different for us.
What was your favorite thing about the movie?
Gloria's voice.
Yes. Gloria's such a find.
She was so sharp.
She lit up every scene she was in. It was amazing.
Her outfits, okay, like no joke. Her outfits were amazing. Every single one of them. I was a little ticked that partway through they were like, oh, what's she gonna wear now? They might have even done their Gloria voice. Oh, what's she gonna wear now? She was great. Her crinoline dress that just sounded like she was moving through plastic wrap was great. I mean, I loved her outfits.
Yes. I mean, I think they were joking because there were so many of them, but we will talk more about that in a little bit.
Excellent.
Was there Anything about the short that you want to say before we move on to our main topics?
I guess I have to agree with you inside of your summary that those two kids were just not all that dirty.
No, not at all.
But it was quite obvious that Don had not recently washed his hair and kind of had, something that was a little bit, maybe a little oilier than one would ideally like to have. But like any middle schooler in the middle of the day, like, come on, you don't look perfect at that point in time. You're not shining your shoes after recess,
He was fine.
He was fine.
Absolutely fine.
It's
He
true.
wasn't stinking up the place. If they wanted to make it look like somebody who needed an intervention, they coulda, and they didn't.
Sure, but there's another short where they're talking about people's hygiene and making some girl take a shower and pull up her slip and stuff like that in order to be, attractive to college boys. And she was also just fine.
Yes, she was. I mean, you remember that they had that whole debate afterwards where Crow and Tom decided whether they liked her better clean or messy.
It's true, but it is really, I don't know, that short, okay, so two things. I don't understand things that are telling you how to clean yourself and hygiene, because by the time you're in middle school, you've pretty much already had your habits established. But I also understand because middle schoolers famously can't do hygiene the same way they did when they were in elementary school, because as hormones kick in, your body is changing and you probably need to change your routine. But that's not how this short was framing anything. It wasn't like, hey, you're different now. It's time for you to reconsider your habits. And it's like, no, they're just telling you, you better fold your clothes better.
I mean, I also think sometimes if an educational short has 10-year-olds in it, then it's meant to be shown to 8-year-olds, if you know what I mean.
Possibly,
like you want to
sure.
pitch it a little bit up to make it more like this is what you should be aspiring to. So maybe that's what they were doing, but I don't know. I don't know. This short just is going to make kids neurotic.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I don't like that about it.
Well, I think in the 50s, you were supposed to be neurotic about your hygiene, right? That's what the short is telling me.
Well, yeah, that's what the short is saying. Exactly. But you shouldn't be. Don't be neurotic. It's fine. You're fine.
Everybody
You're fine.
calm down. It's all right to be a little dirty.
Speaking of a little dirty, let's talk a little bit more about this film.
Woohoo!
So there's a scene when a young aspiring starlet walks into the director's office, and there are several posters up in the office. Did you notice this?
I did. Well, she points them out, right? And she says, geez, do you only do movies about gangsters and westerns or something like that?
Are gangster and horror pictures all you produce?
Oh, she's picky now.
Those were made by friends of mine. I think you'll find my type of picture entirely different.
Yes, that scene. Oh, what are the posters? I didn't even look at the posters. I was looking at her looking at the posters.
Well, let me tell you what the 4 movies were that had posters up there. One of them was called Bride of the Monster.
Oh,
and there's one
stop.
called The Violent Years, one called Jailbait, and one called Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Stop. That is some sinister self-promotion, am I right?
You gotta spread the word somehow.
I feel like if you're spreading the word about your movies in your own movie, people have already seen the movie. You know what I mean? It's preaching to the choir.
Well, I mean, it's not like Ed Wood was Tim Burton. Like, he wasn't getting massive audiences seeing these films. If anyone was lucky enough to drop into something called The Sinister Urge, and then they saw a poster in it for something called Jailbait, and then Jailbait happened to be coming around the circuit a few months later, maybe they'd actually be more likely to go to it. I don't
It's
know.
true. Only if they liked The Sinister Urge, though, right? Like, if you don't like The Sinister Urge, you just put 4 posters of your 4 other movies in The Sinister Urge, and that means that nobody who hated this movie is going to go see one of those 4.
Yeah, but he's advertising to the people who are having a good time.
That is true. It is kind of his MO. What I found so amazing and ambitious about Ed Wood is just how much he made.
Yes,
I
he
mean,
did.
just how much he wrote, how much he created in terms of being able to direct or act, or I'm astonished. And it seems amazing how many other well-known names inside of Hollywood in the time that his life intersected with at different points. In The Nightmare of Ecstasy, they have excerpts from a whole bunch of people talking about working with Ed Wood. Sometimes it's about specific movies, sometimes it's about his past. And just some of the names that are inside of there giving quotes about working with him are just astonishing. Just how many people he was able to work with and around, and how many people ended up being connected with him in some sort of way with the funding or with legal issues or something like that. It just seems amazing to me that this guy, who is so much in the mix of everything that's happening in Hollywood during this time period, isn't a more prominent feature of our knowledge of Hollywood during the time period, right? He seems to have just kind of been stripped away from a lot of other people's stories.
Yeah, although I think some of that has been restored, especially thanks to people like Rudolph Gray, who is the historian who put together Nightmare of Ecstasy, which is a really wonderful oral history of Ed Wood. And I think it's currently out of print, which is frustrating. Hopefully it'll be back in print sometime soon. 100th birthday edition seems like a good idea, but I don't get to decide these things. But it was nice to go back to that book because I read it, when the Ed Wood film came out when I was younger and so forth. But it's nice to go back to it and just see all of these people have so many nice things to say. And I will say, after having talked about the creep behind the camera last time, Rudolph Gray in his introduction talks about how some of the information that the people he talks to provides is not quite true, and some of it contradicts what other people say, and he's going to present it because what they say about what they remember can sometimes be more important than deciding a truth, especially when that truth is impossible to determine.
Yes.
And that is the ethical way to do this.
It was a really nice way to go through it. I read just the first half of it, which was mainly about his time as a kid growing up in Poughkeepsie, and about him during the war, and then about his first couple of movies. I think I read the book through when he did Jailbait. And of everybody who was writing, they seemed to either just be in awe of Ed Wood and just charmed by him and amazed by everything he could do, or they thought he was a shady con man who was totally taking advantage and who was kind of schmarmy. And it didn't seem like there was anybody who was kind of in the middle, like you were either totally charmed and happy to work with him, even though being paid was weird and the hours were weird, and he seemed to be manipulating his hours with the union, and the only person he seemed to commit to actually paying was Bela Lugosi. Many of the stories that are being told included that kind of a detail. And then you have some people talking about yeah, he was just shady as heck. What? I don't know what's going on with this guy, and I kind of don't want to know. And I have to say, Chris, and I feel really bad for saying this, I kind of think I would have been on the schmarmy side with him. I'm not sure that I would have been able to work with him and trust him, but I don't know. I can also be very, very tempted by the very charismatic person.
I will say later in the book, when we look at his later years, which got very tragic, and he, had an alcoholism problem, and
they talk about that in the beginning too, though.
Well, yes, but he also became abusive towards his wife at times when he got very drunk, and it was a real thing. And it's fascinating to see how this gets discussed, because his wife is still a big booster of him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, she just will mention the bad times almost in passing and be like, that happened. That's not the thing that I'm here to talk about.
Yeah.
Right? That's not what and I don't want to make any broad claims about that. It feels like a lot of the people around him at that time found it very difficult, in part because a friend and a collaborator is going down that path and you can't seem to help them.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly sad and frustrating.
Yeah.
And what can you do?
Addiction is a really real thing, and it absolutely destroys relationships. It's And I don't at all want to say that his wife was, trying to excuse his behavior. It sounds like she is not doing that she is entirely acknowledging that this was a part of his legacy and not something to be ignored as a part of his legacy. But I mean, that's also kind of the problem, right? Is that Ed Wood was so ignored.
Well, yes, that certainly didn't help.
And that would destroy me.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting way of portraying on the whole, sympathetic portrait of somebody who is complicated, who you could have very bad feelings towards, who is certainly not playing the way that a lot of people expected him to play. He's not being a professional, certainly. And I think that's where a lot of people approached him as being a con man, because he certainly couldn't make it as a person who played by the rules, it seemed. So
No.
he did what he felt he had to do, and that you can have complicated feelings about, right?
Totally. And it seemed like he wanted to have a career that was outside of the major studios, and that was an important part of what he was doing. He wanted independent sources of money. He wanted to be able to make independent films, which would, of course, allow him to have a little bit more control over what he was making. But then the problem is, of course, that he never started a movie when he had the complete budget he needed to finish it. It felt like he just always did something with like, oh, hey, I've raised $30,000. Let's shoot for 5 days. And if we don't finish the movie, I'll just go off and raise more money. And maybe 3 months from now, we can get back to it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's one way to make a movie.
Ed Wood could not hold on to money. And if he was raising money to make something, he would get the money and he would start making immediately. But even towards the end of his life, when money was scarce, if anybody came by and said, oh man, I really need $100, and Ed Wood had $100 laying around, he would give it to the person, even if Ed Wood and his wife needed it far more than whoever he was giving it to. He was
that guy.
He was generous very much to a fault.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that caused a lot of strain on the marriage, but
What else can be done? Yeah, I mean, there were lots of comments about like, yeah, he was super creative, but he was not an entrepreneur.
no, he had no business sense. He made things happen occasionally, but he had no sense.
He needed a Roger Corman, right? Like,
Yeah, well, exactly. Roger Corman's a businessman first.
yes, and was able to have a far more successful career because of it. And Ed Wood was a creator first, and thus could not sustain the real world, like things that you need in order to be a creator, like money and food.
Yeah, he fits way more into our sort of romantic notions of what an artist is, right?
Yeah.
And yet when you look at his films,
Mm-hmm.
most of them, maybe Glenn or Glenda aside, but most of them, for this, this is what, I don't know, but they still have so much personality, even if they are trying to ingratiate themselves to a public that just isn't quite looking for this flavor of this kind of lurid film.
I guess. I mean, what is it that the Sinister Urge is lacking as a movie?
One of the things that the Sinister Urge might lack is that for being a movie all about smut pictures,
Mm-hmm.
as Crow says at one point, they dress the starlet up in more clothes than she's ever worn in her life for her first shoot.
So they put her in more clothes than she's ever had on in her life.
And you have that photographer who's like, ugh, I can't wait to photograph her. And then he puts her in a nightie that's like neck to ankle. What?
It's not a nightie, it's a duvet.
Oh my gosh. But put the fan on it. It's so sexy.
And of course, this is meant to be kind of an indictment of smut and the smut industry, which, you know, this film was made in 1960. And let me just look over the Ed Wood filmography. 1965, he's involved in a film called Orgy of the Dead, which is an erotic horror film.
How erotic is it?
Well, let me tell you, because here's one of the weird things about trying to watch Ed Wood films in late 2024. The best Blu-rays you can get your hand on with the best transfers of his movies are for all of his late period movies after the Sinister Urge.
Oh.
It is surprisingly difficult to get really good prints, really like loving editions of his early films. There are some reasons for that. The guy named Wade Williams had the rights to a lot of them, and he passed away in January of last year, 2023. And a lot of people are hoping that this will clear up some of the availability of some of the films that he was keeping perhaps too stingy a hand on.
Okay.
Including affecting a few other MST3K episodes that have not been able to be put onto DVD, etc. But we'll see. That situation is unfolding, and I don't know anything about it. But I do know that, can I get a DVD? Can I get a Blu-ray? A really lovely 2K transfer of Glenn or Glenda on a disc with all the trimmings and all the bonus features I would love to see? Not really. Can I get one of Orgy of the Dead? I got it right here.
Oh, no. And it has all of the extras that you absolutely want to see?
It's got a commentary track. It's got an interview with a few people. Yeah. So I picked up a few of these discs recently. I picked up the discs for Orgy of the Dead and for a film he made called Take It Out and Trade, which also has as a bonus feature another film that he's connected with called The Love Feast. I'm going to talk about all three of these films. The Violent Years is also now available as a fancy Blu-ray. And there's a bunch of his later hardcore pornographic films that are going to be released in a few weeks. The anthology has been named Hardwood.
Sorry.
It's real good.
That's a good name. That's a good name.
And I'm super looking forward to it. For a long time, these were like the hardest films of Ed Wood to find.
No pun
And
intended.
now they are kind of the easiest in some ways, but
Also no pun intended.
now I get to watch them. So I got to watch these three smutty films that Ed Wood did from 1965 to 1970. All right, let me tell you about them real quick. Orgy of the Dead, 1965. He is the writer of it. He is on set as well, but he's not the director, although a lot of these films sort of were released or people were told he was the director, especially after the biopic came out, because it was a way of cashing in on it. So I thought he had directed this one, but no, some other guy did.
Okay.
Orgy of the Dead stars Criswell
Oh, okay.
as the emperor of like the night or the dead or something. It's about a horror writer, Reed Ed Wood type, and his girlfriend taking a drive on a night with a full moon, trying to go find a spooky cemetery for inspiration. Their car spins out of control, and they end up
In Dr. Frankenfurter's mansion, where he happens to have a party going on?
Yes, but it is Criswell, and it is a cemetery, and the party is all right, you've seen the Nutcracker, right?
Yeah, so the place where I thought you were going to go with this is you've seen the Thriller music video, right?
No. Get that out of your head entirely.
The Nutcracker? You're like the Rat King on Christmas Eve?
Yeah, but you know how when you get past all of that stuff, the second half of the Nutcracker is nothing but like scene after scene of people coming out and dancing for a few minutes?
Yes, for the king and queen type of thing. Yes.
Exactly. That's what Orgy of the Dead is. It is a sequence of 10 dances by topless women, each having a theme and each accompanied by what I'll call mid-tempo, mid-quality, jazzish music, where they dance in sort of a mid-tempo, mid-amount of movement.
Huh.
I mean, I've been to the red light district in Amsterdam once, and I think you have as well.
I have.
You can imagine that sort of like slowly gyrating movement that the women in the windows do.
Sure.
Which is kind of sensual, but if you watch it for more than 5 minutes, is deeply boring.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's this film.
I mean, also not for me, right?
Oh, super not for me.
I also feel like really not able to comment on how sexy that dancing or how like titillating that dancing is, because that dancing is really just not going to titillate me much.
Yeah.
So maybe outside of my area of expertise.
There's also occasional dialogue from the very concerned couple who massively cannot act, and it's amazing. There is a mummy and a wolf man who are the comedic sidekicks. It's not very funny, but it's great in that way. Like, Ed Wood's script is terrible.
And Criswell is like the MC of all of this?
And Criswell is sort of the MC, the master of the night, who's able to deem judgment on all of these things. And he's got a sort of Vampira-esque black ghoul, is what she's referred to as.
Wait, and they're passing judgment? So, like, if the dance is bad? Are there some sort of stakes involved?
In theory, but not really in practice. The movie is not going there.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
that's what the film is. That's what it is. And I watched the whole damn thing, and I have to say, it is a beautiful 2K transfer on this Blu-ray DVD. It is very gorgeous in a weird way. The movie is nothing but a particular kind of vibe mixed with really bizarre dialogue.
Huh.
It's for some people.
Yes, as all things are.
Yes, but it is for fewer people than many other things are. Let's put it that way.
So.
But I don't recommend any of these films unless
Wow.
you know you want to see them, if you see what I mean. I'm glad I saw all of them. I don't recommend any of them.
It's like a naughty nutcracker Halloween movie.
Kind of, yeah. Okay, let's talk about the next film, which is from 1969.
Okay, 1969. So he's moving on 4 more years later. Okay.
Yep. It's called The Love Feast, or The Photographer, or it has a few other names. You know how these films are.
Yes. What will market best in North Carolina, Texas, and California? Different things.
Yes. He stars in this one.
Did he write and direct as well, or is he just starring?
He definitely didn't direct it, and I'm not sure whether he wrote it or not. There's a little confusion as to that.
Okay.
Certainly, some of his lines sure seem like he did, but I don't know.
Could just be an Ed Wood enthusiast who wrote it.
Well, it's a friend of his who directed it, and maybe
okay.
he did the writing. It doesn't matter. An old army buddy of his who's also making what turns out to be softcore porn.
Okay.
Ed Wood plays a photographer who is calling up a model agency to get a pretty young woman to come by so that he can convince her to take her clothes off and he can take photos of her.
Okay.
This then leads to them falling into bed, starting to canoodle and have sex as she's, stripped naked and he's stripped down to the biggest, baggiest white underwear you ever saw.
That seems so unlike Ed Wood, given everything everybody said about him.
Just a choice.
Sure.
But as soon as they start making out, doorbell rings, and it's another young woman.
What?
And so she's brought in.
Is she there to fix the cable? I mean,
Basically, because more and more women come by, and then a man comes by, a cab driver was supposed to go next door, but now he's being invited in to join the cuddle puddle on the bed.
Oh.
And then some more women, and some more women, and then 2 plumbers. And
What?
then some more
Stop
women.
it.
Yeah. And throughout all of this, Ed Wood is getting more and more exhausted because he's not a young man anymore. And to be fair, like, the alcohol has taken a hit to his body as has aged,
Yes.
It happens. But that's part of it. Like, the whole joke is that there are all these young 20-somethings naked and writhing on the bed.
Sure.
And he's just sitting outside on his, veranda and having whatever he can find to drink as he's like, I'm just not as young as I used to be. Oh, my word.
Oh, my gosh. So you have said that he was a photographer. One of the other guys was a taxi driver, and there were 2 plumbers who came by. Do any of the women have jobs other than sexy model?
Oh, I think there's a reporter or something with one
Okay.
of them. But no, I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's not a lot of character development for anyone except maybe Ed.
Yeah, let's just throw naked bodies at Ed Wood and see what happens.
It's mostly an excuse to film naked bodies writhing, but not really, let's say, having sex on the
Okay.
bed until
Sure.
there's, 15 of them or something.
And then the sex begins.
No.
Oh,
I mean, I don't want to judge what is or isn't sex or what is or isn't erotic to people.
fair enough.
These are people who are just sort of writhing on top of each other, kissing and nibbling occasionally at things,
Okay.
but definitely not going much further than that.
All right.
Eventually, 4 women arrive all at once, and they grab Ed, and they put a dog collar on him, and they make him dress in women's clothing and a nightgown and so forth, and sort of make him lick their boots and all that sort of stuff. And that's sort of the big ending of the film, is that that happens to him.
Okay.
Kind of a surprise twist. I don't know if many of the people who were coming to this porn film wanted that.
Knew that there was going to be a dominatrix ending. In the baggy underwear still, so he's there in baggy white underwear.
He's finally given some panties.
That makes more sense.
That's that film. It's an hour long. It is not recommended.
Okay, fair enough.
But it is interesting to see Ed Wood sort of starring in it, I guess. I don't know. like I said, I both think it's terrible and I enjoyed seeing it. I'm glad I got to see it. It was, it's like if you're a fan of anyone and you go see their worst work, their worst movie, or listen to their worst album or something.
You're still seeing somebody you're a fan of.
You're like, oh, I see why you chose to do that.
And it adds to your understanding. Yeah, totally.
And also, I'm not going to recommend this to anyone who isn't deep on this bus.
Yeah. In fact, you might use it as a way to know how deep somebody is on the bus with you.
Yep. The final one is called Take It Out and Trade. He directed, he wrote it, he acted in it, and he even edited this. I don't think the editing is that bad. It is ambitious. Like, it's a lot of editing. This is edited in homage to Laugh-In, if you know what I mean.
Oh, like camera panning in, out, go to a scene, ha ha, next scene.
Well, the camera work isn't like that because that requires more equipment than he was able to get his hands on. But just a lot of cuts and a lot of cuts to random stuff.
Yeah.
There's sort of the basic story is that there is a detective and he's hired by some rich society people to find their missing daughter. She is in her early 20s and she's gone off to live on her own, and they just want her to live a proper life rather than
a smutty one.
Well, they don't know that she's doing smutty stuff.
Oh, okay.
But they want to control her.
Sure.
And so the private investigator goes off in search for her and also to take advantage of the rich guy paying for all his expenses. So there's a bunch of scenes where he flies around the world.
And Ed Wood is the investigator.
No, a different guy is.
Okay.
Ed Wood plays a guy who wears women's clothing.
Okay.
Who's an informant at one point in the private investigator's investigation. And let me just say, one of the advantages to surrounding yourself with the sorts of actors that Ed Wood tended to surround himself with is that Ed Wood is often the best actor among them, or at least the most compelling screen presence.
Sure. Yes.
Like, everyone else is stiff and wooden. The private investigator guy is fine, but he's mostly just sort of smiling like an idiot at the camera.
Oh.
Ed Wood is like comfortable and casual.
Yes, it's a role he's put on many times before.
Yeah, like he just feels fine with these lines that he has written. I'm not saying he deserves an Oscar or anything. But
no, but his performance is more compelling. It draws the eye. It's more believable.
He is the Gloria of this film.
Oh, very nice. Without the harsh voice, I assume.
No, and sadly without quite as good outfits.
Oh, that is a shame.
Anyway, it turns out that the young woman has ended up in a house with a bunch of other women who just like to hang around in little skimpy, drapey things that their breasts fall out of, as you do.
It is so often that just occurs. Yeah.
I guess they're supposed to be, having male clients coming in and sex working with them and whatnot, because that kind of happens, but mostly it just feels like an excuse to lounge. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not a very good movie, but it is again, like a lot of Ed Wood films, it is ambitious in weird ways while just failing on some of the fundamentals.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 smutty facts about today's experiment, the Sinister Urge. Go, Chris, go.
Well, let's start with the clean short, brought to us by Encyclopedia Britannica Films. I think we've explained this before, but it's worth explaining again. Encyclopedia Britannica films were not made by the people who made the famous Encyclopedia Britannica.
No, the film company started life as Electrical Research Products Incorporated in the 1920s, when the idea of films in the classrooms was particularly novel. ERPI's 1937 film Adventures of Bunny Rabbit ends with the narrator asking questions to the audience. What do you think Mother Rabbit is telling Bunny? And that seems to be where that got started.
Eventually, a guy named William Benton acquired ERPI. Benton also happened to be the publisher of Encyclopedia Britannica, and when he heard a kid make jokes about how ERPI looked like Erpy, like it rhymed with burpee, well, he decided it was time for a little corporate synergy.
Oh, William Benton also owned Muzak at some point, and he became a senator. He was one of those guys, And speaking of Muzak...
Well, no, but speaking of music, the boy in our short is named Don, which leads to this moment.
Oh, Mildred. Look at your clothes.
Why, that's as bad as Don was.
Don was the producer?
Things that are dirty.
Don Was produced a lot of music, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, including such hits as Bonnie Raitt's album Nick of Time and the B-52's Cosmic Thing, and such misses as Bob Dylan's Under the Red Sky.
He also produced that Garth Brooks album where he pretended to be a rock guy named Chris Gaines. So that happened. But back in the 80s, his band Was Not Was had a hit with a silly song named Walk the Dinosaur. And if you don't know that song, then we'll have a link in our show notes so you can have it stuck in your head all week.
Okay, now on to the Sinister Urge. Our favorite character was the brassy, sassy producer Gloria, played by Jean Fontaine. Now, if you check Jean's IMDb page, you'll find that the rest of her filmography includes a bunch of French films and TV shows. Some of them, such as Asterix and Cleopatra, list her as providing an English dub, but most seem to be French-speaking roles. And if that's actually her, well, I simply must know more.
Mike and the bots are more excited by a cop named Klein. He's played by a guy named Fred Mason, and IMDb lists his only other acting credit as a film from 1922, almost 40 years before The Sinister Urge. Did we track down a copy of Stable Companions to see if it stars a baby who looks like a young Klein in it? Do we want you to give it a try, listener? Hey, you do you.
Oh, hey, I just checked, and some of those English language voiceovers I was talking about are done by a guy who sounds nothing like Gloria. And at least one of those roles was done by a Jean Fontaine, who is a male Quebecois actor. Oh, Jean, whatever happened to you?
Turns out Jean was married to a Beverly Hills doctor, and Ed Wood and friends found her doing a nightclub act. She provided her own gowns for the film, and they arranged the filming schedule so that she'd be able to change outfits while they set up for the next shot. Smart!
Gloria's smut photographer, Jaffe, was played by Harry Keaton. He also appears as a doctor in The Violent Years, and he had a small uncredited role in a film called King Kong. And he was the younger brother of Buster Keaton. Or was he?
Buster did have a younger brother named Harry, but Ed Wood's Harry spelled his last name Keatan. He ran an acting school where he trained Dino Fantini, who plays our serial killer. But this Harry Keaton also tried to get people to think that he was Buster's little brother, and it looks like IMDb has fallen for it.
And finally, pinking shears are scissors that cut little triangular sawtooth patterns into cloth. We're not sure where the verb to pink, meaning to cut in an ornamental pattern, comes from, but it's probably a distant relative of words like puncture, and probably isn't called pinking because the pattern looks like the frayed edges of a pink, as in the kind of flower, which gave us the name of the color. Well, anyway, isn't etymology fun?
I, of course, knew all of that because I got pinking shears at my woman's shower. And that's time. So, Chris, are you all clean and neat today?
I'm not, actually. I feel pretty dirty right now.
Oh, is it because you didn't shower once a week and wash your hair once a week like our friend Don?
Well, okay, let's see if we agree with the advice this film gives about how you should keep clean and neat.
And it makes sense that we're the people to make these judgments because as you and I are the cleanest and neatest people we know.
We're just randomly chosen people, okay? We're just
Absolutely,
randomly chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
So I've written down all the steps that this short gives, and it starts with take a daily bath in the summer or every other day in winter. And bath can mean shower here.
Yes. I know there are some people who are okay with the every other dayness. I prefer to shower every day that I have to go to work. Mostly because showering is part of what wakes me up.
Yeah, I don't feel awake and I don't feel happy if I haven't had a bath or shower. I mostly take baths because I have a nice clawfoot tub. And why the heck wouldn't I?
How lovely for you. Yes, I mostly shower, though I also think and this is going to go against future advice that they give inside of this. I like to wash my hair every day. Otherwise, my hair gets real greasy and weird looking.
I also like to make sure my scalp gets wet. We'll skip ahead to the wash your hair on the same day every week, lathering twice with a rinse in between. I don't do either of that. I get my hair wet and I at least condition it every day. I don't usually use as much shampoo as often anymore as I used to.
Oh, how funny.
But I need the stimulation and the wetness and the feeling a bit cleaner. And I've never done this lather, rinse, and lather again. I know that it says to do that on the bottle, but I've just assumed that's shampoo propaganda.
It's lather, rinse, repeat.
Exactly.
No, the only time that I have washed twice with shampoo is like after coming home from a camping trip where I have not showered for multiple days in a row, because I find that I don't get clean hair from one wash if it's been a week since I've washed my hair or something. So maybe this whole shampooing twice is a product of only washing your hair once a week. You need to shampoo twice. I don't know.
So, similarly, clean your hairbrush on the same day that you wash your hair.
So I have a plastic hairbrush with plastic bristles. I imagine that if it was, 70 years ago and I was doing this, I might have a brush that was more cloth or actually made out of bristles from an animal where you actually do need to wash it more often. So maybe this is just hey, I have a plastic brush. I really don't need to wash it that often.
I suppose that's true. I also don't use it that often.
Well, you have shorter hair.
I mean, I don't have shorter hair than the boy in this film, but
You have shorter hair than me.
I do have slightly shorter hair than you. It's true. But I also only typically properly brush or comb it or do anything like that if I feel the need to be fancy.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, let's keep pressing on. Soapy washcloth to the ears.
I generally use my hands, not a washcloth. Do you use a washcloth?
I don't. And my in-laws are all washcloth obsessed. And it's just not a part of I never learned to use a washcloth. I don't know. There are other ways of doing this. Also, I just don't find my ears get that dirty.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I also am not a washcloth person. Not if I'm in the shower, right? If I'm washing my face at a sink, then I want a washcloth.
Sure. If you're doing that sort of
but
thing.
not
yeah,
in the shower.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Washing your feet between the toes in the shower?
Sometimes, not every time.
I just don't think about it that much, and it seems fine. I don't know what to say.
I mean, in the summertime I do, because in the summertime I end up wearing open-toed things more often. And so thus my toes get a little bit more dirty. And they need to be cleaned a little bit more emphatically.
That's true. And I just don't go outside, so it's all
yeah,
good.
See, so why would you need to clean your feet at all?
Fingernail brush for nails? I've never had one of these tools. I don't know what we're talking about. I watched this mystified.
When I was growing up, we had a fingernail brush inside of our shower, and I would use it when I was growing up. I don't have one now. My mother still has one by the sink in her kitchen, and uses it for cleaning her fingernails after washing the dishes and stuff, because sometimes you get food residue underneath of your nails. But I typically have my nails clipped really short, because I just have brittle nails. They break a lot. I'm not going to have longer fingernails, so I'm not going to have a lot of stuff caught underneath of it. And I don't use an emery board like the girl does.
Oh, yeah. It's very gendered. Trimming your fingernails, boys are supposed to use clippers and girls use an emery board.
Mm-hmm.
I've used both.
Yeah, duh. Me too.
All right. I tend to use my teeth, okay? We don't need, this doesn't have to go up beyond us, okay? But I know I probably shouldn't, but whatever. It's fine. It's fine. I'm nearly 50 years old. It's fine.
I think you've made it this far. It's going to be okay.
Similarly, you're supposed to trim your hangnails or whatever rather than pulling them. That does seem like good advice.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can't open up a wound that's unnecessary, right?
Yeah, it gets real painful.
Yeah, and it's nice to have somebody else do it. I'm glad they had their mom do it.
Similarly, cutting your toenails after you get out of the bath or shower while they're soft and wet.
Good advice. Ding, 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 ding.
But there is some specifically girl-oriented advice that they have, such as wash your hair in the afternoon or evening so there's time to put it up and you don't go to bed with wet hair.
I'm telling you, I just don't. I've never been that girl. I think that is no longer the case for girls. Like, girls have lots of curling irons if they want to be able to curl their hair, so they don't have to set it overnight and then take curlers out and everything. And sleeping in curlers is the worst. I think my mom did that to me once, and I was like, ow, that hurts. I didn't sleep, and now I'm murderous because I'm a child who can't have caffeine.
So you have, like, shorter hair. Have you ever had longer hair like the girl in the short does?
Yeah, when I was her age, I totally had that length hair.
Did you brush your hair with at least 100 strokes?
I totally didn't, but Marsha Brady does inside of the Brady Bunch movie. And I think after watching the Brady Bunch movie, I was like, I am going to try to brush my hair. I think Marsha Brady does it 500 times, not 100 times, because she is super extra. But I don't even think I made it to 100 before I was like, this is dumb. I got stuff to do.
Well, that is the advice that this film offers. How did we end up judging its advice?
Some of it was right and some of it is out of date and some of it is just plain weird. I think that's where we are.
Well, Charlotte, we have talked about a lot of dirty and some clean things today. Do you have one last thing you want to bring up from this episode before we go?
I do. There is a scene where one of the cops is getting ready to leave the office to investigate another dead girl, and he's starting to grab his stuff and put them in his pockets, and the riff is...
Let's see here. Spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch.
Like he's trying to remember to bring all of his things with him.
He does not actually make the spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch gesture while he does that.
So that was the thing. I've heard spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch is a way like, okay, we're walking out the door. Do you have everything that you need? And I mean, now at this point in time, first off, like, for our listeners, I don't have testicles, but the spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch is just a, hey, do you have everything that you need when you're walking out the door? But I didn't realize it was also a mnemonic to help you remember the cross for Catholics going into church.
Yeah, it's where your hand moves, sort of by your head, lower down, to the one side, to the other side. It's mostly about remembering whether you're supposed to do the vertical before the horizontal and whether you're supposed to do left versus right. You're not supposed to get that wrong, is the idea. So everybody wears their wallet on one side and their watch on the other.
But we don't. I put my wallet in my back pocket, and my watch could be on either arm, depending on what your dominant hand is.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. People used to dress more uniformly back in the day, I suppose.
Yeah, geez. So spectacles, testicles, wallet, watch. I love this riff because we're like, oh yeah, sometimes when I'm leaving the house, I do that as well. Of course, those aren't the things that I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember my keys, my wallet, and my phone. But it reminded me of a mnemonic that my grandmother would use. For hygiene.
Oh, good. Bring it back around.
I know, right? So my grandmother was somebody who didn't shower every single day.
Okay, this is the dirty grandma, not the clean grandma. I know which grandma we're talking about.
Exactly. The one I'm named after. Oh, wait, I'm named after both. Anyway, she would have a special bath that she would do with a washcloth in between showering days, and she called it her PTA bath that she would do. And the PTA stood for pits, tits, and ass.
Mm-hmm. I know what those letters stood for. I could have told you that. I was pretty sure it was going to be tits and not twat. But...
Oh, twat would have been good too as well, though. But yeah, pits, tits, and ass, which I think just kind of meant that whole nether region, you know? But yeah, that's what my grandmother would do when it wasn't her shower day, but she was getting ready for the casino.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you have a fun hygiene routine that we should know about, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we're on Blue Sky at itsjustashow.com. So if you're one of the many people who joined that recently, look for us there. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Luke. Thank you, Luke. For about $1 an episode, you too can be like Luke and help us research and record this show. And then you can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you can find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/164.
Well, Chris, you've already said we're done with Ed Wood movies. There aren't any more that MST3K has in store for us, but they must have something waiting for us for our next show. What's up next?
Well, listeners might probably have a guess that we're going to do something for Turkey Day, but after that, our next proper episode is going to be a return to Season 13 with Episode 10, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come.
Ooh, that's excellent. I haven't revisited Season 13 in a long time. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, but until then...
After his near-death experience, Dirk learns a new appreciation for smut.
This smut was placed here by the Gideons. Take it away, Theme Squad. I got it right here.